Hello and welcome to another episode of the Identity Navigator. This is your host, Rohit. So, we spoke about PBAC, policy based access control, and plain ID in the last episode, which is sort of a known domain and vendor in their space. In this episode, I wanted to speak about something which has recently started getting attention of security executives and a product that is making some good strides. A bit of a background. So, a few weeks back, I posted on social media and asked the vendors in our identity and access management and security space to reach out to me if they would like to showcase their product on the podcast. The conditions were simple. It is not a paid promotion, but an opportunity, and I will speak my mind to preserve the integrity of the podcast. Before we really get started, thank you for all the wonderful comments and the feedback that you all gave me on the last episodes. I really appreciate it. Also, a former colleague and a friend reached out and said that maybe it is the time right now to break the monotony a little bit and invite some guests. So I've taken his advice and am planning to invite some guests, but that has come up with an added pressure of who should the first guest be. So I'm still trying to figure it out. If you have any suggestions, please let me know. So that will probably happen in time. But for now, let's get started on something that I know about and I'm confident about, which is identity and access management. So let's get started on this fascinating new domain that we are going to talk about and a wonderful, wonderful product. Multi-factor authentication has become a mandatory security measure now. All of us, actually all of the end users, are pretty well aware of what is MFA now. Even if they are in the non-technical industry, even if they have non-office jobs, anybody who is using social media probably have heard of multi-factor authentications. And the MFA industry is rich with vendors and solutions such as SMS, emails, push notifications, hard tokens that display an OTP, and so much more. It is also making great strides, and you would hear things about passkeys and FIDO2. I personally feel that every other security measure combined cannot compete with the power of MFA. That said, for every benefit of MFA, there is just one minor problem. It is annoying. And that is how, MFA fatigue sets in. That is how so many of the social engineering attack happens. So that got me thinking, are we in the industry thinking of MFA the wrong way? It's not a technology that's broken, but maybe it is the paradigm of how it works. It relies on the users to do the work of proving that they are the right user before they can do whatever they want to do. And that work from the user means two things. One, it is a lot of work for the user, which means bad user experience. And two, even with all of that, because the user is involved, there is a chance that they can make a mistake and break it. Now, there are a few things that all of us will agree on. Users are the weakest link in cybersecurity. Hackers don't hack, they log in 90% of the security breaches, right? And the third is ideally, this evaluation of is the right user using the right system should be continual and not point in time just before the user logs in. Because what if I log in into my system, make somebody else sit on it and do my work? Especially for the landscape now in which work from home is pretty evident. How do you make sure that the person who logged in is actually doing the work? What is stopping your help desk users or your third party uh, companies that you have reached out to or contracted to allow one person to log in, and then somebody else could be paid at a cheaper rate. Some of their family members could be sitting on their system and carrying it out. So this making sure that the right user is using the system should be done continually and not just at the start of the session or when the user is logging in. Another problem with MFA is that to find balance between user experience and security, security teams are pulling our punches with MFA policies. By confirming user identities just once a day and asking users to authenticate every 8 hours, we are implicitly saying that after you have logged in and before that session expiration happens, after let's say 8 hours, we are trusting you to do the right thing. And is it in accordance with zero trust policies, which says trust but verify? Are you verifying is that the right user using the system after you have authenticated them? Now you can't ask users to, you know, uh, use an SMS or MFA every 4 minutes, every 5 minutes. That is the worst user experience possible. So are we pulling our punches to find a balance between security and user experience? In an ideal world, we should be able to continually authenticate the users. But this authentication should happen in a way that is transparent to the user. So we need to do something that the user is not involved in. We have to make it fully transparent and automatic. We just authenticate once a second, every second. And that's continuous authentication or continuous access evaluation, which solves this fundamental problem. The idea of this has continuous authentication or this continuous authentication idea has been around for decades, since probably the early 70s, of being able to authenticate in a way that is completely passive and is based on behavior. And this is where our showstopper product of the day, comes in. This is called Twosense. Twosense user behavior or uses behavior of how you type and how do you move the mouse to authenticate users. It is essentially unfishable because it is dependent on user behavior, right? As we spoke about, how is the user typing? How is the user using the mouse? How is the user swiping? What time is the system being used? How does the user behave at 9 o'clock before they have had their coffee versus at 4 o'clock when they have had three coffees? How do they type in Slack versus Outlook, right? Because for me, when I'm typing in Slack, I'm probably not being very formal and, you know, I'm pretty fast at it. But when I'm trying typing in Outlook, I do tend to, take a little bit more time in making sure that the mail that is being sent out is legit and readable and all the good things that you know. So, TwoSense, the product, uses the behaviors like these to continually authenticate users. Now, this type of behavior is approved by NIST as a biometric. Now, I have had mixed recommendations from our peers in the industry. The research that I did ensured that this could be used as a second factor authentication. Some of my friends from the FIDO and Passkey did not really agree with that. So I would request you all to reach out to your legal team to really identify if this could be counted as a multi-factor authentication or a second factor authentication. But irrespective of that, a solution like this really stacks on your existing security protocols. And for some of the use cases, they absolutely are a must. So, TwoSense started out with the US Department of Defense and now work with some of the largest hospitals and high security organizations. To their credit, they are doubling in size year over year. TwoSense essentially has developed a continuous MFA solution that is powered by behavioral biometrics and machine learning. So, unlike traditional MFA that only requires authentication upon login, TwoSense continuous MFA works continuously throughout the entire session. This allows for security teams to authenticate user identities every minute, which is 400 plus MFA checks throughout the average workday. During my research, uh, there was a webinar on their website which I found really fascinating. So it was a person who was typing the password to log in into their Windows machine. Let's say the password was written on a sticky note on the desktop itself, right? When this person who was the owner of that machine typed in, TwoSense allowed them to get in. But when somebody else tried to type in the password based upon how the different typing speed was and probably how differently the second person was typing, TwoSense did not allow this to go through, right? And then you can actually create workflows within TwoSense to do whatever you want. You can invoke your existing MFA prompts using your Duos or the Oktas or the Microsofts of the world. You can send out an email, whatever you want to do. It really depends upon how you want to configure those workflows. But I found it really cool that we can have something like that happen. And by the way, it is not just anomaly detection. They are finding out if the user is Dan or not Dan. To continuously evaluate whether the user is the said user or not, now they would have to create a profile for the user. And they typically takes up to 2 weeks to get a lock on the user. And then they can confidently say whether this is the right person or not the right person. Now, if for whatever reasons the tool says it's not Dan, it could be one of two cases. It is really not Dan, or Dan is typing differently because he just hurt his hand, or he has a coffee mug in his right hand, or for whatever reasons, or it could be a false negative, and you could then configure their workflows. You can give the user an MFA prompt. You can give Dan an MFA prompt. You can send an email to Dan's manager asking the manager to approve access or whatever. So, TwoSense is solving the exact problem we spoke about and making authentication continuous and automatic. They are enabling companies to do passwordless, continually ensuring only authorized users are on a device and deliver the same level of security as a UB key, because remember it is unphishable, but with software alone. Now, this just sounds too good to be true. So, let's deep dive. TwoSense got their start working with the Department of Defense, replacing their secret cards, and then shifted to a more enterprise focused version of this around 2020. So I would say they are relatively very, very new. They are headquartered in Brooklyn, New York, and their biggest vertical right now is BPO and call centers. Now, why it makes so much more sense for the BPO and call centers is we discussed about this requirements of somebody can, is working from home, is a third party contractor working from a different office location. They can log in and somebody else could be doing the work. That's number one. And number two, because of some of the PCI requirements and some of the clean desk policies at some of these BPOs and call centers, you are not allowed to bring in your phone or at least your smartphone inside these offices. Sometimes you're not even allowed to bring in or have a notebook and a pen or a pencil at your workstation. This is because you are dealing with customers' credit card numbers. You don't want anybody taking a screenshot of the credit card number or writing down the credit card number and going on a spending spree with that. You can obviously will be able to find that person, but that will damage your brand. And that is why most of these PPOs and call centers working with these or that have to act within the PCI requirements have a clean desk policy. So this means that so many of the regular MFAs like a push notification gets thrown out of the window just because they don't have the smartphone, right? Uh, you could have UB keys. Obviously, that's a brilliant solution. It is just about the cost associated with UB key and because of the high turnovers, the operational complexity. In terms of technology, if in terms of these BPOs, if they are giving them a UB key, it is it is pretty secure. But it is just about with the high turnover rate, how many UV keys are you provisioning? You need to have an entirely different team that is managing the UB keys and getting the users to return their keys, sending them the shipping labels, and then provisioning the new UB keys to the new user. And especially in this world where users or so many people are getting fired, you don't want an employee who was just fired to, okay, hey, can you send me your UB key back? So most of the companies, because of things like this, bad press and operational complexity around it, just buys another UB key when a new user joins in. And because of the high turnover rates in these BPOs, that is a significant cost. Another thing that I liked about TwoSense is their approach to authenticate, is to find a way to take something that is transactional and driven by human effort and turn it into something that is continuous and fully automatic, driven by software effort. To do that, they leverage something you are that can be measured passively. This is behavior based authentication. NIST mentions it in their zero trust guide and in also their uh, identity and access management authentication guides. In this approach, you look at a user behavior and use machine learning and AI for each user to learn to recognize them. So you basically create a profile associated with each user. And this profile creation or getting a lock on the user, TwoSense approximately takes 2 weeks to get it done. And it might have changed. It could be 9 days versus 15 days. This is something that their sales team would be better able to tell us. Now, based on users' behavior, they can then authenticate them and react to a change in the user at any point in the time. So, if somebody else steps into a session or onto a laptop, we can then sense that and alert the infrastructure reactively to the fact that this happened rather than needing to wait for a session to expire. So that could mean if I'm typing and then I leave my workstation to somebody else and somebody else starts to type, TwoSense would be able to capture this that, hey, this may not be Rohit or Dan, whoever your example user is. So for TwoSense, it is not about building a better technology or mousetrap to authenticate users based on transactional paradigm. It's about changing the whole paradigm so that it is a process that's always on and where the system is responsible for correct execution rather than a process that happens once in a while where the human is responsible. Now, these are bold things to do, right? And they are challenging how enterprise offerings are solving for MFA. Enterprise offerings like Microsoft Authenticator, Ping ID, Okta Verify, Google Authenticator. So what they are doing, either they have $1 billion exit in the near future or a possibility of fading away. But I believe continuous access evaluation and how TwoSense is doing it, the former is more likely. So the play right now is about replacing those enterprise offerings, or not replacing those enterprise offerings, but augment them and target selective use cases that plays to their strength. They need customers to start thinking about identity security as something that is continuous game instead of a transactional one. And a lot of times that can be very challenging process because they're fighting against the conventional wisdom of something that's transactional and educating the users that we have to make it continual. For that, they need to justify the value. Like, how do they reduce friction for your users? Reduce number of challenges that they actually have to do. And at the same time, being able to react in seconds instead of months. If somebody who is not your user gets access to an endpoint or gets access to a system using somebody else's creds or account, even if it is a hijack session or unlocked device, they sit down at and really being able to step up and integrate those types of signals. Think about this. If an attacker gets access to your systems via social engineering somebody's ID, they normally are dormant in the system or sitting in the system for months as they are traversing laterally. Now, with something like Sense, you would be able to see when an ID is being used. Is it really the person using that ID? So there are a lot of implicit benefits for it as well, and you would be able to identify them based upon your use case and by conversating with the Sense team. The challenging part is that a lot of infrastructure that we normally use is built for discrete transactional identity security signals and not for continual ones. So Sense is not just fighting against conventional wisdom, but also infrastructure vendors. More the risk, more the reward. Some of the use cases that I think could be really important here are a perfect example of enterprise IAM, specifically in the offshore or outsourced call centers or help desk because of its unique environment like we spoke about. Because in this use case, we need MFA, but it is often a clean desk environment, meaning the people who work in the secure facility for a call center are not able to bring their phones with them and they need to do a 2FA. Leaving aside the bad solutions like putting the authenticator applications on desktop, which is frankly quite stupid, everyone's mind goes to deploying hard tokens and for the population. Right? We already spoke about how the management of hardware as an authenticator across an audience could become very tedious very quickly. And so how Sense can be leveraged there is being able to take their continuous authentication and endpoint agent and roll this out to your entire population. So if you don't want to afford hard tokens and phones are not allowed, Sense steps up, no phones, no hard tokens, endpoint software authenticator. It is something that can tell you immediately if somebody is outsourcing their job to their nephew who lives in the house with them. It can tell you immediately if somebody who is not your employee has gained access to an employee endpoint or an employee account. Another use case where Sense is getting traction is passwordless. Now, they will not be your first thought if you are buying for a passwordless solution, and rightfully so. But I believe they have a huge play in the market where they can augment the current solutions. By, let's say, using a combination of Sense and Microsoft, you can leverage device trust and biometric trust to create an invisible passwordless multi-factor authentication and do that in a way where even if somebody steps up to an open endpoint, you can be able to respond to that in real time. We spoke about how it can take up to 6 months timeline to detect a breach, and Sense claims to bring it down to less than 2 minutes. That's pretty bold claim. And Really, if they can match up to this, what can somebody really do in less than 2 minutes? If nothing else, it is worth having a conversation with them. So, based on these use cases, it may be hard for them to rip and replace the existing MFA solutions, but it is a valid play for them to collaborate. The founder seems to recognize this, and a big part of their roadmap is integrating with single sign on, IAM, and other pieces of security infrastructure. Right now, they have got the majority of the things covered with Okta, Ping, and one login. All the major SSO vendors are something that they can integrate with minimal work. They also have a deep footprint in the Microsoft ecosystem. Another thing that I considered during the Twosense research was scale. If you solve a real problem, then you need to do it at scale or it doesn't matter. All of the signals coming in from every user, they have to do this in a very individual way where each user is being authenticated as an individual, which means the AI for each user needs to be distinct and run in parallel as a process. Right? So there has to be an AI for an each user, right? Scaling this horizontally is a huge challenge. And so far, they have done it incredibly successfully, obviously leveraging a lot of public cloud infrastructure. A side note before I forget that they are SOC 2 Type 2 certified. I believe if they can tie themselves with cybersecurity insurance and ensure everybody needs to have the continuous access evaluation, it will be a big, big win for everyone. Obviously, for cybersecurity insurance companies, because the less chances of breaches, the less they have to pay out. Obviously, win for the customers that they are more secure, and win for the companies for the same reasons. One thing that you would have to do if you implement TwoSense is the workflow management for what happens in the middle of a session. When we know that this is no longer a user in the middle of a session, what do you do? It can be, I want to alert the SOC team to put it in the SIEM and we will build our own workflows. But you know what would make the most sense is automatic remediation. Otherwise, this would just be another data point, sending it to a SIEM, right? An automatic remediation where the signals are identified and then the policies are in place to be able to take action, to remediate a risk that is detected and do that in a way where the human is being notified of something that happened, of how it was remediated, and then they can go and investigate rather than needing a human to step in. So if you're trying to include this in your strategy and bringing in TwoSense, talk to them about automatic remediation, or at least think through this. What can you do? And don't just send those signals to simply a SIEM and we will deal with it when we will deal with it, because that never happens. Some of the biggest player in IDP space have already started working on it. Continuous access evaluations. Look at Microsoft's risk-based conditional access policies, right? For everyone who knows me, you know that I'm deeply infatuated with how Microsoft solves some of these risks, especially with their Entra ID product, with their P2 licensing and risk-based policies. Now, if TwoSense can pass their signals and Microsoft policies can consume it, it would be a match made in heaven. They're still a young company and I'm expecting too much of them. But one thing that is great about them, or two things that I've really found great about them, is A, they are super technical, and B, they are flexible. They are willing to work with us and don't have the red tape that some of the bigger companies have. They try to be as flexible as possible and not lock you into a situation where if you buy TwoSense, your user experience has to be this way, or they are going to own the entirety of the what authentication looks like. They actually do define their roadmap based on customers' feedback and requirements. Now let's talk money. Their licensing is simple. They charge a license fee per user per month on an annual contract. Right? So it's not like, hey, you had 800 people in total using the systems, because people would be coming in and coming out of the onboarding and provisioning and deprovisioning. So it's like, what's the average number of users who used the systems in the last 3 months, and that is how they bill you on a per user basis. They are happy to do POCs on their own. If they don't agree, just tell them that I sent you. That will not make any difference, but still wouldn't hurt you. Uh, Overall, I got the impression that they can be very flexible on pricing and billing. In one of their webinars on their website, for one of the products that they have, they mentioned $3 per user per month. So it's it's not a bad bargain, because you can definitely consider them right away for your help desk or call center or BPO use cases. You can also consider them for your IT support use cases, or the IT system admin use cases. So it will not be your entire user population that would need licenses for. So something for us to consider. Another thing is, and I was really worried about, is they will not be able to tell if I am typing in Outlook or if I'm typing in Slack. They would also not be able to see what am I typing. They would be able to just differentiate that these are two different apps that I'm using, and they won't be ever able to get that data in. But definitely, when you are having the conversations with them, make sure that you have conversations around privacy, what data is being sent out to their machine learning model, is the data being shared across uh, different vendors or customers, how does that work. Just ask all of these things. Since their product is a software running on endpoints, the best thing about it is it requires no training or skills from an end user's perspective. In terms of competition, there are a couple of large or larger competitors out there. The largest of one, or the largest, would be BioCatch. The major difference between TwoSense and companies like BioCatch is that BioCatch is something that is B to B to C. It is consumer focused. It's an SDK that you license as somebody who is building a product for consumers, and then bake it into your product, and it detects fraud, right? So it's a very SDK based versus, just have it deployed on your system and your endpoint are running TwoSense. Beyond that, they can obviously be compared with a hard token. So the security of TwoSense is pretty similar to a hard token in that it is phishing resistant by its nature. It's not really something that you can hand off to somebody else, and it does not come with the cost of managing hardware. It's like a YubiKey, but it is more secure, because it is always on and always available. So it is like YubiKey, but just the continual access evaluation part of it does give it some edge, right? But YubiKey, the user can start using on day zero, whereas for this, you would need to give them about 2 weeks so that they can get a lock on the user, right? Obviously, with YubiKey, you are FedExing it to your users, and for TwoSense, you can deploy it through software group policies. You can find them online at www.twosense.ai, and obviously on their LinkedIn, which I'll put in the show notes. Some call it continuous MFA, some call it continuous access evaluation, but it is starting to become part of the enterprise security. This ties back into NIST controls. This ties back into zero trust architecture, and this ties back into PCI compliance. It is just not a different form of MFA, it is more than that. And TwoSense is doing an excellent job. They are still growing, they are still including more and more use cases, and they are very willing and flexible to work with you. So if you are considering, maybe look at them, see what you think, right? Thank you so much for listening. Do let me know what you think of this episode. If you don't mind, and if you liked the episode, uh, rating this in whatever platforms that you are listening, because I don't know why, but it helps reach to the larger audience, and it just helps in the search algorithms. So I would really appreciate if you can give me a good rating, or if you can subscribe. That would really help us out. Thank you for listening. You can always reach out to me via LinkedIn, or you can email me at theidentitynavigator@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Rohit, your identity navigator.